Canada has built an entire political culture around one strange assumption that elected officials are somehow experts. They're not. The Minister of Health usually isn't a doctor. The Minister of Defense often never served. The Immigration Minister may never have worked the border. Yet somehow we pretend these people are qualified to manage multi-trillion-dollar systems because they won an election. So what happens? Quietly behind the scenes, the country is increasingly being run by consultants. McKinsey, Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, outside experts writing policy, frameworks, restructuring departments, building digital systems, even advising government on how government itself should function. And maybe the real question isn't whether there are too many consultants. Maybe the real question is whether there are not enough. Because if politicians are essentially temporary brand ambassadors rotating through ministries they barely understand, then who actually has the expertise to run a modern country? Career consultants, technocrats, specialists, data analysts, former industry leaders? We're told consultants are the problem, but what if consultants are actually the symptom? The symptom of a political system that increasingly rewards optics over competence. This time on TPL Media, has Canada outsourced government because government no longer knows how to govern itself? Or should experts, not politicians, play an even larger role in running the country? Okay, the question is Ottawa outsourcing expertise, accountability, and even decision-making, and do we even know what they're up to? Paul Macucci, thanks for having this discussion with me.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Definitely. So,
okay, the answer is yes.
So consulting fees last year, $23.1 billion.
Yep.
20 billion, right? So if you look
That's
at
pretty
it,
significant. Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? So really what we've done is, whether it be systems, whether it be consulting, any major industry right now or ministry has a consulting team side by side with that minister or that bureaucratic team. Now, for those of you, a lot of us know politics, and we know politics in Canada was set up to basically, the premise of parliamentary politics is to have the bureaucracy basically not fight, but to provide the tension against the government or the political people in the
counterbalance, if you will.
Our counterbalance in parliamentary politics is supposed to be that. And the state ongoing knowledge in the government is supposed to sit with the bureaucrats. So they're supposed to be your ongoing mainstay. So regardless of the policies of the government, which change off and on, there's supposed to be a counterbalance fight that maintains the state of the direction of the country for the good of the country. Right. And that's why the counterbalance between bureaucracy and politics exists.
Well, okay, so then you and I have this discussion, good or bad, indifferent. Well, you know, when it's $24 billion going out the door, and that was annually, I think you said. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the annual number.
So over the course of the term of a government that hangs in for 4 years, you know, you're looking at a pretty significant number there, you know.
Now, can I add just a couple things, Mike, on that? That doesn't include IT services. It doesn't include what they call management consultant, engineering, or temporary help.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because on the top list, governments increasingly rely on outside firms for, when I did my research, IT, digital transformation, procurement, HR, cybersecurity, data analytics. All of this is outside of that budget, you're saying?
Yes. That's another $12-ish billion on top of the $23 billion.
Quick note there, 12
and then
bill.
you add a couple more billion for consulting. You know, we all know the Liberal famous consulting contracts that went out, which became Justin Trudeau's probably one of the key factors to his demise was you know, going through that. And then, you know, the temporary outsourcing just for jobs.
I think a lot. Okay, so now you take a look at this, and the critics will say, okay, this kind of consulting creates a dependency, you know, ongoing, and I think that's obviously illustrated. It's you know, I could tell you that the names of the top 6 consulting firms, and we all know the names. You know, it's the KPMGs of the world, IBM's, PricewaterhouseCoopers, all of these big name companies and consulting firms, of course, are big ticket winners of these contracts. It reduces in-house expertise. to some degree, the critics will say.
Yeah.
The critics will say it weakens accountability because there's no, it's tough. And we've seen this time and time again, that when the government tried to remove $500 million from the budget, as I recall, on consulting fees, but the problem was they didn't have the accounting backup to actually find where they could save that money. So I do remember that. And then the other thing that creates a problem, the critics will say, is it's a revolving door influence. In other words, whatever consulting firms in there at the day will have an influence based on their other client base and so on and so forth. I think those are all fair. And I think that we've seen this illustrated. But may I offer a counterpoint to this, to the critics?
Yeah.
Okay.
Shoot.
I can name 7 or 8 members of parliament that have ministerial positions in our cabinet that have no idea what they're doing. I mean, I could start to point fingers at our safety and immigration and resources. These are individuals that really have no expertise. And so I say to you, no, I don't want to reduce consultancy. I want to increase it.
Okay.
I would like to see it be the majority of the expertise that runs our government, because I don't want non-experts that come in, and MPs will say this, Paul, I've said it to you.
Yeah.
They feel like they're drinking from a fire hose for the first 6 months that they're there. They finally settle in, rounding a year, and what happens to them? They get moved to another post, or they get demoted and they end up a backbencher. What good is that to anybody? What I think is, and I don't know that it's been done, but if there's a rupture in the system of accountability, let's handle that, okay? First and foremost, let's create a system that is so ironclad that as a consultant, almost to the point of a citizen looking it up, we can see what you're getting paid for. And then let's run our government on the basis of what the politicians say they'll do with the consultants. Lay out your consultant plan for me. If we're spending north of $200 billion on consultants while you're in office, show me your consultant firms, show me what they're doing, show me the experts that are on the payroll there. And look, I'll take your newsletter every 6 months with what the experts are reporting back. But let's put experts in and not politicians.
All right. So I get where you're going. You're saying to solve the challenge is to actually start to vote not only for the politician, but his list of consultants.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying,
and what they'll do with them, not even just a list, but we're going to bring consultants in from this firm that do this at this price.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So a couple of things I just want to back up, because I think this has been a major problem going on for decades. Right. I think we both agree this has been something that we've seen, the increase in consulting costs. I even was one of them, quite frankly. And we used to sit around. I remember sitting around the table at one of the big consulting companies, and we used to say, okay, what projects are we going to put together? And we used to come up with these crazy buzzwords for projects that we could actually sell to the government, sell to the private sector. We would go out with a marketing firm. We would package them. We'd go to them and we whether it be Y2K or whatever, and we would actually create whole programs that we could outsource and sell to government agencies. I
could see these meetings now. Guys, I've got this idea. Now, it's a crazy acronym. It's called EBITDA.
Oh, yeah. No, but we would do pitches.
Yeah.
So then they would take us, and we would get trained to pitch, and there'd be pitch teams. They would go in and they'd pitch projects to the government and to private sector based on where we were going. And interesting idea. And it was because in those days, government was so poorly paid. So ministers were so poorly paid. So one of the things that we kind of filled in the gap when this really took off, and this was, crepes, I'm aging myself, but this was in maybe the late 80s, early 90s. This really kind of became the craze because governments were finding there was a brain drain. There wasn't enough people that they could pull into government that had the wherewithal to run these crazy projects that we were pitching. And they were crazy projects. And there were some smart guys. Like, I'm not saying the guys around me were brilliant, some of them on the consulting side, and they really did have skill sets the government couldn't replace.
Right.
But now, over the last, few decades, every year we see politicians coming in and they say, okay, let's give ourselves a 10% raise. Let's give ourselves a 20% raise.
Yeah.
So now we did a show recently. I was shocked how much at the municipal, provincial, and federal level that a politician makes.
Oh, it's a good paycheck.
Oh yeah. So now, it's interesting. And I'm just going to, I did an article in a newspaper in Mississauga recently, and I did on what they make. Mayor makes 300 plus thousand. The counselors, if they're, on the Peel board and also on the Mississauga board.
The mayor makes $300,000 plus per year.
Yes.
Just wanted to underscore that. It's, how many people run for mayor? It's not a huge group. The voting base is not huge, and we hand over $300,000. And often the Mayor Scarpitti, for example, I mean, he's built an empire by the sounds of things.
Highest paid mayor in Canada, I think, at this point. We're well above the 300. And then you have councillors making 200 plus. So say 230. So now, you're getting into the point where everyone's, so the consultants and the politicians are in the same snack bracket. They are. Now, I'll be totally transparent. If you're a highly performing consultant like that, and you're at the senior management level or partner level, you're making double or more than that. You're doing really well. So if you catch like in my career, I was on the first bond offering for the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. I was the acting CFO of the GTAA at that time. It was a very interesting gig. I did very well by it, quite frankly. Right. It was a good gig, quite frankly. We got the project going. It was a whole political shuffle. And then one day we were just given the airport. And then we had to restart rebuilding it with new terminals and everything. So if you're a good performing and you're a lucky consultant and you get on the right projects, you can bonus really well. So the consulting teams do really well. The political teams are starting, they're getting up there. They were really lowly paid, like I said. Now they're getting up into the decent zone. So now we should start to put the onus on not only the voters, but the politicians to be up to speed on a file. So, like a consultant. So if I give you more money, I say, here's more money, you need to be there. You need to be there now. So I guess the old, you mentioned, I've heard it a million times. I'm drinking out of a fire hose.
Yeah.
No, I'm paying you
to drink from the fire hose. Drink.
Drink quickly.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's why you're starting to get paid so much. So, I just wanted to go back and.
No, but I agree with that point entirely.
Yeah.
I do see consultancy firms as fat cats to some degree.
Oh yeah.
But we rely on them, I guess, for the expertise that's not there. What I think is concerning to me is the lack of transparency that comes with consulting. So I would almost rather, and of course, I've had a wackadoodle idea here potentially, but the mission behind it and the sentiment behind it is probably consistent with many Canadians, which is, okay, if you're going to do something, at least let us see behind the curtain what you're doing.
Right.
Because it would be better for all of us. You would probably get better support from people. We would see that you're employing people.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I really think that the other thing is, if I was a politician, I would want this. I would want this because I would constantly be able to blame the consultants. Well, the consultants.
Yeah, sure. It gives you a safety net.
Yeah.
But you're being, I guess, in the, our government is voted in not for safety nets. It's voted in to make decisions. So the more consultants we hire, the less they can go back and say that we were advised to do this. Well, we have, and I just checked before I came into the show, we have 448,000 approximate public service members.
Okay.
So, 500,000 people in public service. We got a lot of smart people in public service, right? And again, that tug and pull is supposed to be between government and bureaucracy. That's what keeps us on a straight and narrow path in the parliamentary political system that we're in today. We have to have that tug and pull. Now,
and as you pointed out, government jobs are paying better at the consultancy and executive level.
Sure. Now, if you look at, and I've done this and math before, I've done the calculation. If you look at and when I was a consultant, great gig. I paid into a benefit plan that was set up and there was a match to the benefit plan and everything else. If you look at a government pension plan, your argument that you're not making as much money as the consulting team is a misnomer, to tell you the truth. So if your average age is, say you live to 80, quite frankly. You retire at 60 something because you factored out. Government workers traditionally factor out at 3 times the average of 3 times their last salary times a factor.
I've watched it in my own family.
So if you basically get a factor 80, so you get 80% of your last average 3 years. If you go out at 200,000, you're making 160,000 in your retirement plus a full benefit package. Your total package lifetime is pretty damn good and pretty close to probably what that consultant who's making more money at the beginning. So the argument now that we don't have enough skilled, I think all those arguments back in the 90s and the late 80s were good arguments. I think we passed those. And I know we passed them because when you do the calculation of what everyone makes now, I don't think you can actually have those discussions anymore. Politicians make too much.
It has to be commensurate, right?
Yeah.
To some degree. Or you get nobody or you get the worst.
Right.
The brain drain draws everybody away.
Yeah. What's it? 7s hire 5s.
Right.
Yeah. So what you do is you start to get a bunch of people inside government who hire people less talented than themselves.
7s hire 5s is the name of this episode, Brady. Let's write that down. I like that.
So now, okay, let's walk through your scenario. So you go out and it's election time.
Yeah.
You come to the table and you know, my name's Bill. I'm running for ward, whatever, or seat. I'm going to run with ABC, EFG company because I want to be the minister of housing and they have the most skill sets. Okay. You win.
Yeah, okay. At the basic level.
Yeah.
But I would hope that they would be like, here's the projects that I want to address.
Right.
And here are the consultants associated. And here's what they're already giving me estimates.
Right. Okay.
Okay, that does sound a little crazy now that I've said it out loud. I understand, but that is my thinking.
No, but it is a very interesting because if you are using consultants to this extent to run your government, you are really voting for that group. Like I understand where you're going. I do. It does. So
it's so funny, but yes, that's what I would prefer.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I've given up on the. I'm so sorry. I guess what I'm saying is I've given up on that political front person.
Right. But okay, so then a little bit of a challenge, and I think you hit on it at the beginning of the show. The memory of your government erodes.
Yeah.
So the basically that tug and pull I talked about, the why things were done, the direction of the government, the history will start to erode because now you're actually replacing it with a third party, which quite frankly might have, we did, for example, the consulting firm I worked for, we did projects across the world. So we had like team members in Africa, Egypt, part of how I ended up getting into the business I did when I was a young man was I went on a consulting gig in the US. And I ended up falling in love with an industry, and that's how I started. But, the problem was those companies are far and wide, and they have a lot of objectives. They look at a global scenario. So when we used to go to our annual meetings, we didn't look at Canada. We didn't look at the US. We looked at the globe. It was really, and for a young man, it was really interesting because we used to have our annual conference when I became a senior manager. And they used to fly us to all these crazy, over to Europe, and we go to England, we, go to Paris, and all different for the annual conferences. And they would have business leaders from the organization across the world.
Wow.
And they would talk about how they globally saw the world. These consulting firms. They didn't talk about specifically. And then we'd have a Canadian arm and off we'd go. So you have to remember, as the world is being controlled, they're a big part of the strategy for the world for different governments. And I think sometimes we don't think about that, right? So
that is true.
Yeah. Now,
is that a benefit or is it a real problem maybe?
Oh, it's a definite problem. I saw it as a kid. I'd be like, okay, like the direction I'm getting to do a project here, is it based on a global strategy of this company or is it based on a Canadian strategy? So, and that's where you have to be careful because once you start to outsource the government, you're outsourcing it to companies that have then, created their own global. They want, if you're an IT company now, and especially in this day and age with like AI, quite frankly, think about it. I'm an AI company. I have global services. I was listening to Elon Musk yesterday. His vision of the world is wild.
It is pretty different.
Yeah, he's talking about AI data centers and being built on the moon now. Like, it's crazy. This conversation yesterday I was watching, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is a little scary. He's going to build it all up there, and I'm thinking to myself, what is his vision of the globe? So now he's the guy who's going to come in and give you consulting services on Starlink or something else. Like, these are all interesting ideas.
No, you raise a good point. The perspective coming from another, if I was in Dubai creating a project, my perspective would be from Dubai.
Right.
And with influence on wherever I'm doing business or, diplomacy.
Yeah.
You raise a good point. I get it.
Yeah.
So essentially, look, we can be directing global efforts that don't really benefit us at home through these consultant firms. I can see that.
Well, they're coming to the table.
I mean, the last thing you want is to bring a finance and banking consultant from another country in to run your country.
Yeah.
Do you?
I'm not going there.
That was just for
I'm
fun.
not going there.
That was just for fun.
No, but it is a very interesting scenario that we have to watch out for. So then, so this is the interesting part, and I'm going to go off on it for a minute. We've not looked at it that way, which I find totally bizarre at this point. So we've kind of said, okay, we're going to allow third parties to come in, provide us advice. We're going to take advice from them. We're going to go in a direction. And I think part of that is kind of why we get some of our wacky decisions. And wacky to the point where we'll come up with an immigration policy that actually started in France somewhere, lasted 30 days, was a total bomb. And we take it, we put it into Canada, and we leave it. And we don't touch it again because some consulting firm put their name on it. And we're like, oh, that's okay. They put their name on it. Like, so I think two
things. Nobody wants to admit failure. And secondly, well, that's the policy we chose. It did not work over there.
It didn't. And a lot of times what we find in Canada right now is these policies that we got from these consulting firms that we transferred over to our own country, they've already stale dated in the other country. They bombed. And we let them go. And we let them go because we actually got comfortable that someone else's name was on that. So we're like, my name's not on it. Let it run, right? I'm still getting my 6 weeks vacation. I'm still getting my pension. I'm still getting there. So I don't have to worry about it. And we've done a lot of that in the last 10 years, right?
That is true.
It's been a real travesty on how we've done it.
Once again, kind of behind the curtain.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done it behind. But Michael, before the show, I went in and I started looking around. I said, who has managed this really well? So, and when I mean manage this, so I'm going to, but who has actually took a look at their contracts and their outsourcing of projects really well? And of course, a country that we talk about quite a bit on the energy front, which is Norway, has done it exceptional. So I want to talk to you about that.
I feel badly that the more we talk about this country, the more I feel like we're jinxing them. Everybody stay away from Norway, okay? They've got it right in many ways.
Well, I know my next trip, I mentioned to you before the show, I am going there.
I think it's fascinating, an amazing country, actually.
It is. Well, as you look at this oil crisis, and we go through it everywhere around the world now, it's impacting. You see this country, which is not a huge country population-wise. It's about a quarter our size. They just took a direction when the rest of the world didn't, back in the 80s, in the early 80s. And they started to strategize on an 8-year cycle. So they didn't stick to the 4-year election cycle.
Right.
They started to create plans that were 8 years long. Now, U.S. president was just in China. And there was a lot of discussion on the airwaves about the difference between a communist and a democratic and a free capitalist society. And one of the discussions that you heard a lot about is how the long-term vision for China is the goal, no matter who the leader is. Mm-hmm. Right? Norway,
they have this long 100-year plan.
100-year plan, and they work at it, and they're not in a hurry. They don't have to. You hear all these things. Norway is not the same. It's a democratic society, but quite frankly, they take a longer approach, and they do that through the way they've structured their government, which is interesting. So, and I took a look at a couple things. So, IT projects. So, their IT projects are only outsourced to companies to add on to their centralized backbone.
Okay, so what does that mean? That they already have created their own policy, procedures, process?
Yes. Well, and they basically have, so the government there's one department that handles all the systems for every ministry of government.
Okay.
So, and then the add-ons are projects, the plugins are into that system. So consultants are hired, but they're hired, like, for example, if we have the Ministry of Transportation, and it actually reports all into the central hub, which is the backbone system of the government. And there's an app or an addition or an extension of that system to take care of air traffic control, to take care of highway planning, to take care of all those things. That system works within the same backbone and is secured the same by the bureaucracy of the country. It's not outsourced.
I understand. So the systematic outsourcing is transparent to that system.
Yes.
And likely only hired on once the government has begun a project or has budgeted for this one specific part. They're not blanket handing off ministries by and large to consultants.
Right. You know, we talked about the 448,000 civil servants that we have on the federal level in Canada. Right now, I don't know, we did a thing on the show, and I'm probably going to get the number wrong, so forgive me. But the project for payroll, a new payroll system, has gone on for a decade. It's
incredible.
Tens of millions over budget, and it has no apparent end. Again, outsourced, quite frankly, has been a runaway program, not getting to the end. These are why our projects go. The Norwegians have taken another approach. They have a longer term planning cycle for all their programs. Like I said, the 8 years. They centralize their key technology, and it works for them. The other thing they do that I thought was really interesting, they have labor laws that only allow, let's call it, a 1-for-1 replacement of government workers.
So you can only replace one government worker with one consultant or international.
Yes. And so if you have a key government worker go off, leave, pregnancy, whatever, quite frankly, you can bring in a consultant. I did that role. I actually, with the one company I was with, it was for bad accountants who were outsourced to become CFOs of companies who had lost their CFO.
Okay.
So you can get a new CFO, but you get one until that other new CFO gets
Actually
located,
arrives,
rehired, or comes back. So they have very strict laws, the Norwegians, about how they
You don't get a team.
Yes.
You get a person.
They're protecting the institutional memory of the state. I love that line.
That's a great line.
It is a great line, and very important to your, because again, the goals of your state won't necessarily align with the goals of the outsourced consulting companies.
In other words, what's good for Norway stays what's good for Norway and doesn't necessarily have to plug into where consultants are in other parts of the world trying to handle scenarios for those countries.
Exactly. State authored contracts. This is a really interesting approach. So we have the same thing. We don't use it. I don't know why we don't use it.
Sorry, we don't do this?
No. So for some reason, again, and I'm going to go off on a tangent for a minute, but a little bit of the outsourcing government, you have to ask yourself, and this, when I'm reading through this, I'm thinking, okay, our governments go on a large number of trips, so abroad, in conferences, to learn about other governments. So you think at some point in our history, in our Canadian history, we would have figured out, quite frankly, that we need to approach this a little differently. But we obviously decided not to do it. And you got to ask yourself, why do we like it the way it is? Because we know the way it is doesn't work very efficiently. Like, we're not, our productivity in Canada isn't like raging. We're not doing anything on a world record, world breaking scale when it comes to manufacturing or mining or housing or anything else. So we got to ask ourselves, is it the system of choice by the governments over the last, 50, 100 years? Is it basically been something we've liked because it gives us more power on the political side? there has to be a rationale for it, because
Well, you know-
no rational mind would think that the way we run this is the right state.
When we threw this show idea, my initial reaction was to hate the consulting thing overall because of the transparency factor.
Right.
Then I started to think about the politicians that I've met over the years, and I thought, oh boy, we really do need some experts.
Yeah.
As you and I talked, I did point out that it was a bit of a wackadoodle idea that I had to illustrate a point,
It's a
but
solution.
it's not the whole solution. I think the solution that I hear in all of this, Paul, is that 8-year institutional memory, that the institution of the government remains beholden to this system and we stick to it. I think what happens in Canada is we could have the same glory. Well, we could be having the same story right now, Paul. Like, okay, we one for one. We have a system by which we only bring consultants in at this point. We know exactly what they're doing. We've made sure that there's nobody that we could hire on full time to do this in the government. But we've lost control of that with only 2 times more of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is where the problem stems. Now, how do you unring the consulting bell?
How do you unring it? Well, I guess you have to get people to commit to it, and that's, if the intention is, I guess, and I think as Canadians, as we get into the next phase of what's going to happen in the country, I think we have to ask ourselves, do we need to do that now? Like, I think that's the question we have to ask of our governments. Do we need to stop this, and do we need to internalize the talent and basically create the institutional state memory here at home, still using consulting firms. I'm not saying they're not. I did it. I understand it. I think it does have value in places. But quite frankly, we can't dumb down our bureaucracy to the point where it doesn't have any powers or rights or, quite frankly, ability to alter change. Figure out a long-term strategy for the country and enact it when we have a 4-year voting cycle and we have consultants changing to and fro. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're just creating a sub-industry of government. What we're doing is we're creating two government industries. One is an outsourced, which is almost as big as the insourced, and therefore the two are battling constantly. The institutional memory is lost, quite frankly, because you got to think about it. Like, I've talked about my story. I left the country.
It's
right.
true.
I picked up and decided, okay, I've seen now I've globally understood what's going on. I've decided to move off and do other things, before I came back. And so, as a young man, it only made sense to me that I had to learn more about the world. So are these people that we're actually bringing in to actually outsource to, and they're creating these reports and projects and make things go forward, are they going to leave? And that's not good for Canada. That's the brain drain that we're trying to avoid.
And that's really we have no view on that. We have no eyeballs on who comes and goes from a consulting firm because it is private. I think maybe somewhere in the middle here, Paul, between my wackadoodle idea and how nicely it's been executed in Norway, we have to find our way back to that center where there is more transparency. We have a longer institutional memory. That would be a great thing for the next government to bring in. Instead of telling us that you want more privacy for the conversations between government officials and less privacy for Canadians, why don't we focus on, we're going to create something that gives us longevity, like Norway. Not something that's a flash in the pan idea that we're taking from some country that helps us maintain a better UV rating. I don't know.
Yeah.
Why don't we take and reset this a little bit right in front of the eyes of Canadians, saying, here's where we've been, here's what we need to do to create it, here's where it's working, and here are the pain points to get us there. But we're going to do it over 8 years, and we're going to pass it into law so that no matter who comes in after us, they're going to continue that strategy.
Right. Well, it's interesting. And also your contracting scenario. So this is something the Norwegians do really well. They have a public and financial management board that forces vendors to standardize risk shifting contracts. So what they do, it's a little different than we do. So you sign a contract with the government, and for example, ArriveCAN, that's one. You sign a government that goes to a centralized. Now we do have this. We don't do it very well, and it's probably because of discipline versus structure. But we don't do it very well. They do it very well. So they centralize their contracts. They offload the risk. So as a consultant, you can get paid very well, but you have to perform very well. So you couldn't have this payroll scenario where the payroll system never gets built. You can't have this ArriveCAN scenario where it starts at 64,000 and ends at $100 million, right? None of these can happen because you would not get paid.
Right.
These contracts are very well written, very preferred. They're centralized, right? So they come out of a centralized source, and they go forward. So, this has been traditionally what they've done.
That's interesting because you know why, Paul? If a contract goes bad, the same division of the government is going to handle it in court. They're going to have experts that know how to handle that on behalf of the government.
Yes.
It becomes a very tidy, fairly transparent process for outsourcing.
Yeah.
That's a really clever idea.
Yeah. No, but again, these are around, right? And each of these, now the interesting part is it's assigned to a outsourced group, and the Norwegians actually assign a project manager to it from the central source. So not only does the ministry that's working with the consulting team, but there's someone who comes in. I've seen this on the premier level a few times in Canada, and I've seen premiers do this effectively, where they create like these A team of people.
Yes.
And they assign them to major projects as they assign them to their ministries. I think this is an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea when you want to get stuff done on a fast-paced basis and not in a crazy over-budget, bad timeline.
Where do these people come from?
They usually come from consulting firms. So they usually are older gentlemen and ladies that actually have retired or are retiring, have moved on and are finishing their career. And they come to work inside governments. They can be lawyers, accountants, doctors, like people, kind of at the end of their career. They have no axe to grind. They've made their money.
I was going to say, and
they're doing it for the public good before they retire, and they get a good salary. I'm not saying they do it for free. They get well paid, but they also manage projects to their retirement, and then they go off. And I think that's done really well in other countries. The Norwegians just do an excellent job. The other thing the Norwegians actually do really well that we need to take a lesson from, their technology and monitoring and compliance as each of these projects are rolling out for their software in each of these projects have really intense security systems that they can monitor. So these aren't just projects they cast out into the world and let run out. They surveil them, they track them, they CRM them, they do us. So there's a whole system. Like by having central surveillance on the projects, they actually run the projects in an organized way like you would in a business, which, our prime minister.
Sort of at 30,000 feet, but with a full view.
Yeah. Now, our prime minister knows this. Like, quite frankly, he has been a business person. You could make the argument previously that some of our prime ministers probably didn't have the skill sets, right?
No, but the acumen of this guy is
he would know this, right?
Corporate structure and organization.
He would know centralized systems. He would know contracting. He would know security. He had been around major security firms that would have overseen projects on a national and on a provincial level. So we know this as Canadians, but we decide not to do it. And that's the crazy part of what's going on in the country right now. Now, the worry I have is, because this can go on. Listen, this debacle can go on for as long as we want to go on as Canadians. The world's changing now. So I think what all these people need to ask is the world change, is this system sustainable? Like, can you run a decentralized system by ministry, have them go just, we've become desensitized
we have
to these messes that constantly we hear about. So on a weekly, monthly basis, we hear, okay, here's another runaway train. This project took off, never completed. This another runaway. So we got desensitized to these projects and to these things going on as they were outsourced and they were put in the hands and reported on, and money was put towards the budgets and we started building them and constructing them. We got desensitized. But now it's eroded our efficiency and our production in the country. in a time that we have to pick back up again. So now we have to pick back up and start to get people employed, producing things and making things again. Can we afford to keep doing this? And that's I guess I come back to that on a lot of shows, Mike, but my worry about the way we're doing this is it sustainable?
Well, I mean, we'll take a look at over the course of Carney's 4 years, let's assume that he does a 4-year run as prime minister. This is hundreds of billions of dollars in consulting, both internally, externally, on the main line and below the line, probably much, much more. So, yeah, I do agree that we need to do something about how we handle consulting. I guess what I'm worried about, and I would put out there, Paul, this is conjecture, but I would put out there that if I was voting in Norway, I would be voting for somebody with a lot more scrutiny in my heart than I've probably done as somebody here in Ontario, because I'm desensitized, because I see the system as broken often.
Right.
But if you are in Norway and you saw this institutional memory,
well, look at,
it's yours to protect, and who you elect is who will protect. Right. That's a little rhyme I came up with for Norway.
Yeah. No, I get you. And when we go to the happiness shows, always pops up of one of the happiest countries in the world. Right? Yeah. Because housing, security, the oil and gas scenario has created a wealth fund that has made them secure. Their political system does seem well thought out and quite structured and planned. So all these things, the comfort that you give to your country based on the things you're doing makes for happiness, right? So the country is a happy country because, quite frankly, they're doing all these things to structure their government. And I'm not saying get rid of consultants. So just so we're on the same page, I'm not saying get rid of.
No, I hear you.
Get rid of consulting contracts. I'm saying adopt some of these things. Make the consulting contracts risk-based. Have them absorb some of the risk.
Let's create a long-term strategy as well.
Centralize the contracts like we should have been doing from day one. Quite frankly, make them more driven to the performance of the major projects that we're doing. So listen, if a bunch of smart people in engineering firms go out and figure out amazing ways to mine things that makes us the world leader, they should be compensated
out
the wazoo, right? But that's in the field. That's not doing a report to government.
That's actually executing
a project.
The major project.
It's a project. You're the third arm on that project that's going to go make sure that project gets done on a timely basis. And that's where our money should be reallocated now. Our money should be reallocated into infield performance for these companies.
I feel like I got schooled, Paul.
No, you didn't.
No, I really do. Because I think that you're right. I think that many of the things that we could do, we just haven't done. And these were good suggestions. Oh, poor Norway, man. They really are the test case for us, aren't they?
They are.
I hope you enjoy your vacation. You won't need sunscreen. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time right here. Don't forget, you can subscribe. Tell your friends to do so. You're supporting the network when you do that. And you also get the full program. Paul, thanks. I appreciate this.
Thanks, Mike.